Are purpose-built EVs a smarter choice, or is it better to convert an existing combustion-powered model to make it electric? Should you go with a startup auto manufacturer or purchase from a more established brand? Is the Genesis Electrified G80 a better battery-powered sedan? Or is the new Lucid Air the better electric sedan to get? We'll try to answer those questions and more in this very quick comparison test. Representing combustion-powered vehicles that have gone rogue is the Genesis Electrified G80, a large and lovely luxury four-door that is basically a G80. They took the engine and transmission out, threw in a nice big battery pack and a couple electric motors, and voila, you have a smooth and silent four-door. And I love the styling of this car. It has presence, it's bold, but it is also clean and very tasteful, which is difficult to do. Now, of course, there are a few differences here, and the biggest one you're going to notice is the grille, because it is all filled in, of course, to improve the vehicle's aerodynamics, but the overall shape is basically the same as is the texture right here. They've also incorporated the charging port right into the grille, the top corner here on the driver's side, which is an awesome place to have it, though I don't care for these little plastic plugs. They're very fiddly. You've heard me complain about this before. They're not the best. I'd much prefer little doors to block those off. This car looks great. We have standard LED headlamps and tail lamps. This color is called Halcyon Green. It is worth every penny of the $575 they charge for it. So overall, a very handsome car, but I think the interior is even nicer. This cabin is absolutely stunning, which should be no surprise because Genesis is absolutely knocking it out of the park these days. Now, compared to the Lucid Air, a much more traditional design in the Electrified G80, which is not a bad thing. This is beautifully built, and all the controls are, of course, very easy to use. Now, in the Lucid, big difference is that we have basically a single screen up here on the dashboard, where we have two separate panels here in the Genesis, plus a third touchscreen down here to handle climate controls, where the Air has kind of like a tablet interface there. Anyway, 12.3-inch display ahead of the driver for your digital instrument cluster, and this also offers a unique 3D effect. It's not going to show up on camera, but it is an interesting parlor trick. As for the main display, it's a super widescreen panel. It measures 14.5 inches, and it does incorporate a touchscreen, though it's quite a reach from the driver's seat, so really you're better off using the knob that's down here on the center console to control the multimedia interface. Beyond that, we have a head-up display and loads of wonderful materials. There's open-pore wood trim. We have standard Napa leather. There's microfiber on both the roof pillars and the headliner. As for comfort, this driver's seat adjusts in 16 different ways, and it offers a feature called Ergo Motion that basically it's like a massage function that will help reduce fatigue on long drives. The passenger seat also adjusts in 12 different ways, so even the person riding shotgun should have no complaints. The Electrified G80 sedan has not one, but two 136 kilowatt electric motors that naturally provide standard all-wheel drive, which is super easy to do in EVs. You just throw in more electric motors. Now, those dynamos also deliver 365 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque, so you have no trouble accelerating in what is a very large and heavy luxury sedan. Providing the energy is an 87.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack that Genesis says can DC fast charge from 10 to 80% in just 22 minutes, which should put its peak rate at around 235 kilowatts, just like the eGMP-based cars that we've tested in the past. Of course, they include the Kia EV6, the Genesis GV60, and the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Fantastic vehicles that DC fast charge incredibly well. As for range, this sedan offers 282 miles on a full charge, which is a good number, though we always like to see about 300 if you can, but still 282 is respectable, though the Lucid Air offers a lot more than the Electrified G80. Overall, this car is smooth and comfortable, which is exactly what I want in a luxury vehicle. I'm not interested in setting lap times or going to the track or anything like that. The Genesis Electrified G80 rides very smoothly, it's quiet, and of course, as I mentioned, it offers very strong performance. If the Electrified G80 is the best of the present, this Lucid Air is a bold vision of the future. This car was designed from the get-go to be an EV, so there's no potential engineering baggage that might be left over from trying to convert an existing car to be a battery electric model. And as you can see, this sedan is incredibly stylish. Super sleek design on the Air, very clean and elegant. I think this is an extremely attractive vehicle that is undoubtedly extremely aerodynamic as well. Now, this particular example rolls on some optional 20-inch wheels that don't look too bad. And then, of course, it is dressed in an available paint color. This is a $1,000 option. The color is called Zenith Red Metallic. It's sort of a wine-like hue, though I do think it goes quite nicely with some of the Air's silver trim. Now, the car is available in a few different grades. There's the base Pure model, then there's Touring, Grand Touring, and then the Sapphire trim, which is the ultra-high performance version. They're promising more than 1,200 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of less than 2 seconds, which is absolutely insane for a street car. But what I'm testing here is actually sort of the mid-range Touring model, though I'll warn you, it is still very expensive, but more on the price in just a minute. So, since this was designed to be an EV right from the start, and because engineers worked to make the motors and inverters and all of that stuff as small as possible, you get a ton of room inside the Lucid Air, both in the cabin and in the storage trunks. Let me pop this just like that, and you'll see how nice and roomy the front trunk is. A good amount of space here, but wait, there is more, because there's a very deep well underneath the floor, just like that. Lots of room for storing stuff in this car. But of course, it also has a quote-unquote traditional trunk as well, which you just pop right here. And it's interesting the way they design this, because the cut line is sort of on the side of the vehicle. It's a unique way of doing that. But inside the rear trunk, lots of room, as you can see, but mirroring the front, we've got even more storage space underneath the floor here, which, as you can see, they are taking advantage of. You never know when you're going to get a flat or need a jack. All right, there is so much to talk about inside the Lucid Air here. We're not going to have time to even scratch the surface, but I want to hit a few of the highlights to give you a taste of what this car is like. And one of the first things you're going to notice is sort of this infinity glass roof that melds the sunroof panel with the windshield. It looks absolutely amazing. This is not a feature I would necessarily want for myself, but how cool is that? Also looking like it's right out of a science fiction film. Up on the dashboard, we have a 34-inch 5K display that just sort of floats here, unlike the Genesis where we have separate panels that are distinct, like in a traditional car. This is all one unit. We have infotainment over here, we have your instrumentation in the middle, and then some other various controls for lighting and things off here on the left side. But it looks like something's missing, and there is, but if you swipe your finger like that, this whole separate tablet motors right out of the dashboard, which gives you a whole bunch of other functions. You can control your drive modes and other things like that. Though, curiously, Lucid is very proud that they've incorporated physical controls into this vehicle. So we have temperature, fan speed, audio volume right here on the dashboard. We have redundant physical controls on the steering wheel spokes as well. But then some other functions like adjusting the mirrors or the steering column, you do that on the screen here. Also, you turn your ventilation and your heating on for your front seats through the screen as well, so they're not immediately accessible via a hardware button, but this still seems to be quite responsive. Beyond that, we have Napa leather in this car. There's 4-zone automatic climate control. These front chairs adjust in 14 different ways, and of course we've also got some open pore wood trim that looks and feels like real wood, not just a shiny piece of plastic. All right, let's get the big numbers out of the way right now. This Lucid Air Touring has 620 horsepower and 885 pound-feet of torque, way more than the Genesis provides, and that sedan is no slouch at all. This thing will go from 0 to 60 in just 3.4 seconds, which is practically supercar territory. Now, this particular car offers 384 miles of range, which is fantastic. Though depending on configuration, you can get a Lucid Air with more than 500 miles of range, which is just insane. In fact, it's probably overkill. We also have 3 different driving modes in this vehicle. You access them via the touchscreen on the center console here. There's Smooth, Swift, and Sprint. Of course, as each of those names suggests, they heighten the response of this vehicle and hasten how the torque is delivered. The Air seems very refined and quiet inside, though curiously, there's a bit of whining that seems to be coming from the front electric motor. And I don't know if they're running straight cut gears or something, but it's unusual to hear that sort of noise in an EV. But it's not all bad. It's very quiet, and it does add a little bit of character that's oftentimes missing in electrics. This is an undoubtedly nice car, but there are a few unusual aspects to it. One of them, the all-glass windshield and roof. I'm just not used to seeing sky above my head. There's always a header bar in other vehicles, so to be able to see clouds and treetops as I'm driving is just a little bit unexpected. There are 2 other things I don't really care for in this car. One of them is the A-pillars. They're pretty big and they do block visibility to the front at angles, though this car does have a ton of cameras, so it's not really that big of an issue. And the other element is they've put in a self-centering turn signal stalk, so every time you click it, it goes back to the middle, and I just don't find that very intuitive. So, which of these cars is a better all-electric luxury sedan? Well, that's a tough question to answer, but I think it really comes down to how much money you've got to spend, because the Genesis costs $81,495, including destination. Certainly not cheap, but the Air here, as it sits, is $129 grand, which is way more. And is it worth 1.6 times what the Genesis costs? Well, I can't answer that question, but I think for you, the driver, it comes down to 2 questions. What kind of performance do you want? This offers a lot more, though the Genesis is no slouch. And of course, how much do you hate DC fast charging on road trips? Because the Air has way more range. If the Genesis Electrified G80 caught your eye, check out my full review of this car by clicking right over here.